Good evening. We're going to call to order the City of Sparks Planning Commission for Thursday, January 17th, and we'll start with roll call.
Commissioner Vanderwall.
Here.
Commissioner Terry.
Present.
Commissioner Blanco.
Present.
Commissioner Brock.
Here.
Commissioner Funes.
Here.
Commissioner Peterson.
Present.
Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Assistant City Attorney Allison McCormick. Here. Assistant Community Services Director Alana Morales.
Here.
Okay, next we'll move along to public comment. This is for public comment on the agenda or off. Do we have any requests to speak? Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move to approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair, I move
Commissioner Reed?
to approve the agenda.
Have a first? Okay, I have Commissioner Peterson, thank you. I have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we'll move along to approval of minutes. Approval of minutes of the January 2nd Planning Commission study session.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Reed?
I move to approve the minutes of January 2nd study session.
Thank you.
Second, Commissioner Brock.
is second. I have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next, we'll move along to review and approval of the minutes of the January 3rd Planning Commission meeting.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Reed?
I move to approve the minutes of the January 3rd Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you.
Second,
Commissioner Brock, second. I have a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next, we'll move along to announcements and committee reports. Mr. Ornelas?
Madam Chair, under the category of announcements, if there is anyone in the audience who had received a notice regarding a conditional use permit for an office use on property on North Truckee Lane, that case was removed from the agenda as after further consideration and review, staff determined that a conditional use permit was not in fact required for that use. So that is not on the agenda.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to informational items.
I have none, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move along to public hearing items, and we'll start with PCN 18-0062, consideration and possible action of a conditional use permit.
Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, Ian Crittenden, Senior Planner. This is a request, as stated, for the approval of a conditional use permit to not allow the expansion of a non-conforming, non-restricted gaming use. The site is located at 950 Holman Way on a site that is 5.99 acres in size. As you can see on the vicinity map here, the site is the total area here. This portion here is kind of the school areas, and this portion here is the existing JJ's gaming area. The grocery store has operated on this site since 1966, and a gaming license has been there since 1979. The area dedicated to non-restricted gaming was increased from 1,136 square feet to 3,170 square feet in 2012. The site is in the C2 General Commercial Zoning District. Non-restricted gaming is not a permitted use in the C2 zoning district, but as the use was established in 1979, it is a legally established non-conforming use. Sparks Municipal, Sparks Municipal Code, Section 20.06.003C1 states that a non-conforming use shall not be extended or enlarged by more than 10% of the area lawfully occupied by the non-conforming use as of the date on which it became non-conforming, except by conditional use permit. The enlargement of the non-conforming use shall not extend onto additional parcels. As the requested expansion of the gaming area is greater than 10%, a conditional use permit is required. The existing non-restricted gaming area is 3,170 square feet. The applicant is proposing to expand that by 4,726 square feet to approximately, or to 7,895 square feet. This is a 149% increase, or approximately 2 times the current size. The total area of the Scolari's tenancy is, including the non-restricted gaming area, is 35,601 square feet. The existing non-restricted gaming area uses approximately 9% of that space, and the requested expansion would increase the non-restricted gaming area to 22%. The comprehensive plan land use designation for the site is commercial, or C. The C2 general commercial zoning district is consistent with the commercial land use designation. The site has existing mature landscaping that complies with Sparks Municipal Code Section 20.04.006 that deals with landscaping and screening. The applicant did submit a parking analysis for the site in connection with this request, and a separate request for an administrative review for a new coffee kiosk proposed in the southeast portion of the site. You can see here. I mentioned that because their parking analysis and their trip generation analysis took both pieces into consideration. The addition of the parking or the coffee kiosk will reduce the number of parking spaces. The existing number of parking spaces is 317. The addition of the coffee kiosk reduces that to 303. Based on the actual occupancy and looking at the site after development of both the coffee kiosk and the expansion of the gaming area, the parking analysis showed that the 302 parking spaces will be required. And as came up during the study session, there's some additional information I wanted to give you guys on, or give the Planning Commission on, I'm sorry, got the wrong set of notes in here. Based on the existing parking requirements and the parking requirements of the proposed. So as it currently sits, JJ's occupies, as mentioned, 3170 square feet, and their current parking demand is 27.7 parking spaces. The existing Scolari's requires, or their parking demand is 101 or 108.1 parking spaces for a total of 135.8 parking spaces. The proposed expansion would increase the JJ's area to, I'm sorry, I've forgotten where that number was, 7,895 square feet, which would require 68.9 parking spaces. But that reduction to the Scolari's would drop their parking requirement to 92.4 parking spaces, with a total of 161.3 parking spaces, which is a total additional required parking spaces of 25.5. As mentioned, all of that math goes into, based on what the existing uses are in the site, to a total required parking for the site of 302.4 parking spaces, and 303 parking spaces will be provided. So they do comply with city parking standards for the complex. The applicant also submitted a trip generation letter for as I mentioned, both the proposed expansion to the non-restricted gaming area and to the new coffee kiosk. The additional gaming area would have an addition of 64 average daily trips, with 4 of those being AM peak hour trips and 6 of them being PM peak hour trips. The coffee kiosk would generate an additional 386 average daily trips, with 42 of those being in the AM peak hour and 20 of them being in the PM peak hour. However, the reduction in grocery store area would reduce average daily trips by 1,547, with 18 fewer trips in the AM peak hour and 79 fewer in the PM peak hour. Cumulatively, this will result in a reduction of average daily trips of 1,097 trips, with an increase of 28 AM peak hour trips and a reduction of 53 PM peak hour trips. Staff has received some comments from the neighbors, or from the citizens that got noticed. 2 of those phone calls were looking just for more information and didn't state a position on this request. 2 of those phone calls were in opposition. Staff also received 3 emails in opposition to this request. 1 was initially attached to the staff report, 1 was handed out at the study session, and another 1 was received today and should have been handed out to staff, or to the Planning Commission today. Both or all of those should be available on the website either today or tomorrow. There are 5 findings related to conditional use permits. Finding C1 addresses compliance with the comprehensive plan. The site has a C or commercial land use designation. This land use designation does not mention non-restricted gaming facilities, but as this is a non-conforming use, that would be expected. However, the commercial land use designation does allow a wide variety of intense commercial activities that are not dissimilar to gaming uses. The goals and policies in the comprehensive plan that are relevant to this proposal include goal MG1 to support economic vitality by providing non-residential land use, excuse me, support economic vitality by providing a non-residential land use base. Goal MG2 to foster diversity in the land use mix, including residential, commercial, industrial, employment, and recreational areas citywide. Policy CF1, when reviewing a new development, the city will not approve an application unless city services can be provided at acceptable levels. And policy C4 requires sidewalks for pedestrians on all street networks within the city. So allowing the expansion of this non-restricted gaming area in this location would provide a non-residential land use, specifically a recreational one, which supports goals MG1 and MG2. The site has been developed since 1966 and and city services are available at acceptable levels, including sidewalks, which supports policies CF1 and C4. Finding C2 addresses compatibility with the surrounding properties. To the east of the site is more commercial properties. As you can see here, the site kind of is the whole property, but there's additional commercial to the east of it on this property, and then across Pyramid Way, there's more additional commercial property that's being developed. And then to the north and west of the site are properties with the designation of MF14, which is multifamily. Those have been developed as townhomes. To the south of the site, the properties are designated IDR, which is intermediate density residential, and are developed predominantly as duplexes. This request would not change the types of uses that are already allowed on the site, but would only change the size of those areas that are used for non-restricted gaming and grocery store. While gaming does have a higher parking demand, then a grocery store, gaming has lower traffic or generates fewer trips. Ultimately, because there is adequate parking on the site for the proposed expansion of the non-restricted gaming use, as well as the coffee kiosk, and the traffic study shows a drop in average daily trips, and the non-restricted gaming use still represents less than a quarter of the total Scolari site. City staff believes that this expansion of this non-conforming gaming use is compatible with the existing uses adjacent to the site. Finding C3 addresses natural resources. As the site has been developed since 1966, staff does not believe that this request would impair the availability of natural resources or the region's ability to support the population. Finding C4 requires that the application as submitted and conditioned will address identified impacts. Staff identified two main impacts, potential impacts. Those were parking and traffic. As mentioned, the parking study submitted by the applicant calculated the total parking demand for the proposed expansion of the non-restricted gaming area and the construction of the coffee kiosk to be 302.4 spaces, and there will be 303 spaces available. The parking code for this, the parking for this site is in compliance with Sparks Code. And then traffic, as mentioned again earlier, the applicant's traffic letter shows that 64 average daily trips, additional daily trips would be generated by this use. They are the expansion of this use with an additional 4 in the AM and 6 in the PM. However, the chip generation letter also indicates the total number of average daily trips would decrease with the reduction of the shopping area, the grocery area. Finally, finding C5 requires a public notice be given. Public notice was published in the Reno Gazette Journal on January 3rd, 2019. In addition, 166 notices were mailed to owners of property within 500 feet of the subject property on January 2nd, 2019. The Planning Commission functions as the required public hearing. As stated, staff does support this request. That is the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have.
Thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any questions at this time, or we can, is the applicant's representative?
They are.
Okay,
Again, the representative.
go ahead and have them.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Planning Commission, good evening. For the record, Garrett Gordon, tonight on behalf of Scolaries. With me tonight are Joey and Jerry Scolari, who have been longstanding members of Northern Nevada, and happy to appear before them and have them here with me tonight. I think my list of items, Ian did a fantastic job as always, covering each and every one, including the findings. We are excited about the upgrades and the additional amenities that will be provided at the site this year. We did submit 2 applications, as you heard, one for a coffee kiosk that's already been approved by staff. It will be a human being coffee kiosk, very nice, modern-looking amenity in the southeast corner of the parking lot. To be sure, we covered both parking and traffic for the kiosk and for the gaming expansion. We submitted them together, did a traffic study that coupled both uses, did a traffic generation study that coupled both uses to make sure both met all the findings. So we're happy to answer any questions and look forward to completing this project at some point in this year. Probably start construction in June and finish up by the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Do we have any requests to speak?
Madam Chair, I do have, 2 parts.
Okay,
They are both in opposition. They did not wish to speak when they turned them in. However, they wanted to reserve the right to speak if
Okay.
the questions weren't answered.
okay. Do you want to? Thank you. Karen Bolin, would you like to come up and speak? And if you'll just, excuse me, if you'll just state your name and your address for the record, please?
My name is Karen Boland. I live at 917 Russell Way in Sparks.
Okay,
And we didn't get a notification, which I was a little bit offended about, because we were right across the street from the 500-foot mark. What is the expansion? What are you putting in there? I mean, is it more slot machines? Is it, I mean, what is it? What's the expansion consist of?
Ms. Bolin, you need to address us, okay? And then the thing is and then we'll take your questions down, and then what we'll do is we'll call the applicant back up to answer your question for you.
Okay.
So if I heard you correctly, what your question is you want to know what is included in the expansion and what they're doing?
Kind of a gaming expansion.
Okay,
What's going to stop it? I mean, you know, in a few years, are we going to have more? Is it going to be bigger and bigger and bigger?
Okay.
Are they going to keep coming back? And, you know, we've lived in the neighborhood for 35 years, and I don't think that's really good use of the property because we have plenty of gaming around anyway, and we live in a poor neighborhood, and I think that it draws economics from the neighborhood that could be better spent on food and life and those kind of things, and I just don't think it's a good use for our particular neighborhood.
okay. We appreciate your comments, thank you, and we'll make sure we have the applicant answer your question. Then there's Larry Bolin. Do you wish to speak? Okay, thank you, sir. All right, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'm going to bring it back to the commission. If the applicant can step up, please, and if you don't mind addressing Ms. Bolin's question.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Garrett Gordon on behalf of the applicant. So currently, there is 50 gaming machines. This expansion would increase it to 92. Would also probably double the sports book, William Hill Sportsbook. Then also provide some other amenities that we thought would be nice. Bigger kind of conference, catering, game room, if you will. You know, there's a market out there for fantasy football leagues to come and make their picks and be there, or have a birthday party or have some other amenity there that the community can use. The amount of gaming and the increase was not arbitrary in that in order to keep the economic viability of a supermarket there, a grocery store, it's a competitive market, as we all know. And so it's very important to have the revenue from the gaming to offset potentially the losses or break even of the grocery store. So coupled together, we think it's a win-win. And again, grocery store will stay, increase to JJ's will be a good asset, we believe, to the community. And we thank staff for recommending approval. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, do any of the commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Carey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Garrett, I had a question for you, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So as I understand it, I just want to make sure I had my numbers correct. So there's a sports book, and there's currently 55 machines?
There's currently 50 machines. For the record, Garrett Gordon on behalf of the applicant. There's currently 50 machines, and this expansion would go to approximately 92.
And there's a existing bar in the current
Correct.
use? Would that be
Correct.
expanded?
I believe the bar area stays, is the bar area will be expanded as well, correct?
Okay. Are there any plans for future expansion beyond this one? Because it's my understanding it kind of went from a grocery store, slot machine area, then it became expanded and you added the sports book and the bar, and so now it's expanded again. Are there any other future expansions?
I would say, for the
This time?
record, Garrett Gordon, at this point in time, no. I think we picked a number that works for the property. Not to say, I wouldn't reserve the right to come back and make the same request in the future. This is a very unique piece of property in that it's had an unrestricted, non-restricted gaming license since 1979, which I can do the math of 79. I was born in 79 and I turned 40 on Monday, so it's 40 years. They've had a non-restricted gaming license. So it's very unique. They could go from the state level to 1,000 machines, but it's certainly subject to, local government approval. So to answer your question, at this point in time, there's no plans to go any bigger.
I guess a follow-up, Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
just popped into my head, sorry.
I always appreciate your questions, Commissioner, so no problem.
Thank you. Is the site viable for future gaming expansions? I know we had the parking analysis. It seemed like it was pretty tight. And your argument is part of the compatibility is that this keeps the grocery store and the other commercial uses viable. Would the site be able to accommodate future gaming expansion?
I guess it depends, right? I mean, it depends on parking, traffic, what the current tenants are in there, what their ratios for parking are and their trip generation, what could go, in there in the future. We now have a kiosk with a drive-through, so that's certainly added to not only current daily trips, but AM peak and PM peak, so we're kind of constrained there. But you saw in the numbers, when you decrease grocery store, which has a very high parking ratio, as you know, with gaming, which is a little bit lower, we're always going to be fine there. But you just got to look at it on a comprehensive level each crack at the apple, so.
Thank you, and happy birthday.
Thanks.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Blako?
How many square feet does this leave the store to be after the expansion?
So the grocery store is currently 35,601 square feet, and we're increasing this to 7895. I have the percentage of the 8,000 is approximately 8% or 22%, but I'd have to do the math. I can pull out my phone real quick if you want. Or do you have it?
No, that's fine. I was just curious in relation to.
We're at 27,710
Okay.
remaining square feet for the grocery store, Commissioner.
And it's my understanding that you're insinuating that the grocery store is not profitable, or you're operating at a loss at this time?
Well, let me say, for the record, Garrett Gordon, it's not a finding for, that I have to make or that the staff has to make for, financial viability or profit or loss. I just mentioned in response to a question, there is a method to the madness. It's not an arbitrary number, just the financials of the whole site. We expanded to a level where it works.
Okay. I also have one more question, but I'm not sure if you'd be the person to answer it. What would essentially be the difference between a gaming area and a casino? Like by definition,
Ian,
as far
do you want
as
to come
that
up, Ian?
goes. And I'm just wondering
Commissioner
if.
Blako, can you I
well,
guess
I'm wondering-
specifically word it, what you're trying?
Okay, I'm
what
wondering
your
at
question
what
is.
point will this be held to the same restrictions as a casino would be as far as like proximity to public parks or so?
So
Like,
I can
what
take
point
a
does it hit
Yeah,
that?
Commissioner, I can take a stab at it. So typically, if you're over 15 machines, you're a casino, you're a resort hotel. You have to build 200 to 300 rooms, no matter, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. You got to build a swimming pool and a restaurant and do a nugget, right? But this property is so unique in that it has a grandfathered gaming license, which allows you to do unlimited number of slot machines without being called a casino or a resort hotel. In that context, we have a gaming area, and in the city of Sparks, you can't expand that non-conforming use, the gaming area, more than 10% without a use permit. So that's why we're here. So the
I
gaming
understand.
area is important for the 10% of the restricted use, but we're not a casino because we're not a nugget.
Well, I guess just my concern is that I've noticed that that gaming area is significantly different than any other gaming area I've seen in the sense that it has its own entrance and it's walled off from the rest of the store. And it just seems that it's not necessarily a gaming area in the traditional sense. And I'm just wondering if there is ever a point at which it would be restricted and considered to be a casino, essentially.
And there's also a reason for that is that, this gaming area, non-restricted use, had to go to this state gaming, right? And they want to make sure we have a plan, a security plan. If you block it off, it makes it easy to prevent minors from coming in and out and gambling. So it's the security plan and the location of the walls, and location of the entrances, and the security cameras are all part of the package that the state reviews and approves.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners have any questions? Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion or further questions. Commissioner Carey?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I had a couple questions for staff. I was a little confused with your analysis for finding C1. And I was just reading the staff report, and this is a non-conforming use that is expected. The commercial land use designation does not allow a wide variety of intense commercial land uses that are not dissimilar to non-restricted gaming uses. So in staff's opinion, are you saying that the proposed expansion of the non-conforming use is similar to other commercial uses?
Staff was just drawing an analogy that, yes, as far as finding C1 is concerned, sorry, I'm gonna get it in front of my eyes so I don't misspeak here. It looks for compliance with the comprehensive plan. As a non-conforming use, you can never strictly find compliance with the comprehensive plan because it's non-conforming. But what we put in there was that the uses of a non-restricted gaming facility are not so dissimilar as to make that, I don't know how to put this, it's not that big of a difference between some of the other uses. Now, obviously, we don't allow them in this district for a reason, but when we're looking at something that's a non-conforming use, we want to make sure we understand that if we're expanding that non-conforming use, it's not making fireworks next door. It's not an industrial use that really doesn't, this is a use that is, you could draw parallels to a lot of what they do to other commercial uses that are permitted. So while strictly speaking, it's not a use that's listed in that district, it does have pull similarities to many uses that are. There's all staff was trying to be able to make clear there.
Thank you, I appreciate that explanation, that does help. So in terms of the proposed use, so the only identified impacts are traffic and parking?
That's what staff identified, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have actually one more question.
Commissioner Blanco?
For it to be considered a gaming area, is it the requirement that there is a market attached to it? Or could there be no market and still be considered a gaming area?
So per the code, the City of Sparks Code, Commissioner Blanco, there's no difference between a casino and a non-restricted gaming area or a non-restricted gaming location.
Okay.
Those are synonymous. There's a bunch of semantics that happen at other levels, but essentially, if you've got non-restricted gaming, you are a casino, and if you're a casino, you have non-restricted gaming. They're essentially the same thing, but just not, we don't use the term casino in our code very often. We refer to non-restricted gaming.
Well, all right. And so, like the other non-restricted gaming establishments, is there rules that they need to follow about being as near to a public park as this one is?
We do not make separation requirements for non-restricted gaming. They're limited to certain zoning districts, but that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
Not, Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Commissioner Peterson, I'll let you.
I move to approve the conditional use permit CU 18-0015 associated with PCN 18-0062, adopting findings C1 through C5, and the facts supporting these findings as set forth in the staff report, subject to the two conditions of approval as listed in the staff report.
I second that.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Commissioner Carey?
Couple comments for the record, if I may.
Sure.
This was a tough case. We've been getting a lot of those lately. It must be our year. I can certainly understand, the economic argument in trying to keep the store. It's an important store for the community, but it's been there a long time. And certainly the Scolari's family's been a great operator. But I respectfully disagree with the recommendation from staff, and I won't be supporting the motion for approval. I think with respect to the 149% increase and expanding it 2.5 times the size of an existing non-conforming use, I just think that's too big. And I'm really struggling with making findings C1 and C2. From a land use perspective, I can certainly understand how this use got put in there, but I don't think that it meets the intent of our land use plan. And I don't see how allowing expanding on restricted gaming on commercial areas surrounded by residential is consistent with our plan or policies. With respect to finding C2, I can't find the compatibility. I just think with the size that's being requested is too much with what the surrounding uses are. And I think really if this is, if this motion is successful, I would just put on record that I think that this is probably the absolute maximum amount of gaming space that can be accommodated on this site without there being additional impacts. And I won't be supporting the motion. Thank you for allowing me to put that on the record.
Thank you. Any further? Okay, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Motion carries. Next, we'll move along to PCN 18-0067, consideration and possible action of a request for a conditional use permit.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Planning Commissioners. Jonathan Cummins, Planner. PCN 18-0067 is a request for a conditional use permit to allow a parking facility on 0.24 acres at 601 Field Street. It's outlined in cyan on the image. The property is zoned MUD with a mixed residential land use designation where parking facilities require conditional use permits per the municipal code. The proposed site will be for the private use of the Boys and Girls Club, who owns the parcel, as well as the main site, which is about 100 feet to the west, nearby, just across the city limits. Boys and Girls Club provides transportation to members to and from schools around the area, and as a result, they have a small fleet of vehicles that they use to provide that service. The current part of the facility where the vehicles are stored is tucked into the existing parking lot of the main building, which is just below the legend on the far left of the map. So the Boys and Girls Club is proposing through the city of Reno to expand their main facility to include a new charter school, and as a result, that part of the parking lot where they're currently storing their vehicles will need to sort of be reaccommodated on the site somewhere. And so Boys and Girls Club purchased the
proposed site in 2011 and is now ready to demolish the existing building and establish the use as parking to accommodate their expansion. The proposed site would be for company vehicles only. Proposed conditions of approval will require signage on the site to that effect. Use of the site will be primarily during after-school hours with minimal use before school. That point addresses one of the commission's questions from Tuesday's study session, and the applicant's representative as well as myself, we both confirmed that with the director today of the Boys and Girls Club. To address the second question from Tuesday's study session, only drivers and employees of the Boys and Girls Club will be walking to and from the two sites. Students, other children will not be going back and forth. They have a loading area, which is at the northern part of the main site on the Reno side of the facility. Staff believes that each of the following findings can be made by the Planning Commission's. Finding C1 requires conformance with the comprehensive plan. Staff believes the proposed use will contribute to economic vitality of the neighborhood by allowing the Boys and Girls Club to expand, contributing to goal MG1. Project also contributes to a greater diversity in the land use mix of the neighborhood, working toward goal MG2. Finding C2 requires compatibility with surrounding uses. All the properties surrounding the site are zoned MUD with a mixed residential designation as well. There's a mix of single-family, multifamily uses around the site, as well as a small church directly to the north of the facility between the proposed parking site and the Boys and Girls Club parking lot to the north. Given that the use is strictly for parking by Boys and Girls Club vehicles, staff believes that the compatibility of uses in the general vicinity of the site remain roughly the same as exists there today. What impacts might be created by the proposed use, staff believes, would be mitigated by the layout proposed by the applicant, which includes appropriate fencing and landscaping. Finding C3 addresses impairment of natural resources. The previous use of the site is a single-family residence with a detached garage. Staff believes that natural resources are not being negatively impacted by the proposed new use. Finding C4 addresses any other identified impacts. Those impacts are addressed in the proposed conditions of approval to include that the applicant will maintain sidewalks along Field Street directly to the east of the property. That landscaping would be installed to meet the mixed-use district standards outlined in the municipal code. Signage to indicate the private use of the site, and lighting that will keep the lot both well-lit and also not affect neighbors. Staff received no comments from outside agencies. Finding C5 requires noticing. Notices were mailed to 57 property owners within 500 feet of the site. Staff did receive 2 inquiries from residents in the neighborhood, just asking for clarification. And once I explained the project to them, they had no other concerns. Additionally, notice was published on January 3rd in the Reno Gazette Journal. And staff is recommending approval of the item, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to do a presentation?
Thank you and good evening. For the record, Angela Foos with Loomis & Associates here today on behalf of the applicant. This project is kind of an interesting land use project in the fact that the main Boys and Girls Club campus is within the City of Reno jurisdiction, and this parcel is within the City of Sparks jurisdiction. The Boys and Girls Club has owned this property for the last 8 years or so. So at some point, they'd always anticipated using this piece of property for some function. They have to go through a separate process to expand the building itself. And again, that's through Reno. They already have an existing special use permit. They recently went through a site plan review process, and that was approved. So they are expanding. The area where they are expanding is where they currently house their fleet. So what this will do is we'll open up a new parcel that they'll be able to hold their buses and their shuttles. They have 2 trailers, a flatbed truck. It will be fenced, it will be gated. The only one that will be able to use it will be the actual Boys and Girls Clubs. There's no parents coming, there's no drop-off, there's no pickup. We've added a landscape strip within the parking lot so that we don't have just a stale parking lot. We actually have some landscaping in it. We also have about a 10-foot strip outside of our property between the sidewalk and where our gate is. So we'll landscape that area. And then there's a sidewalk there now. It's not in very good shape, so we'll be repairing that and replacing it with a 4-foot wide sidewalk, which ties into the existing sidewalk on both the north and the south side. So like I said, it's a pretty basic request, but it's unique in that this is on the City of Sparks side, and then the actual use of the Boys and Girls Club is within the city of Reno. So it's kind of a hodgepodge, and unfortunately, you guys don't get to see the full package, but what you're seeing is the only thing that impacts this parcel is the parking. So I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, and I'll open the public hearing. Do I have any requests to speak? Okay, thank you. I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commissioners. Any questions? Commissioner Carey.
I had a question for the applicant. Angela, does the Boys and Girls Club have any morning programs? I guess what I'm getting at is will there be any early morning idling of the club vehicles on this proposed parking lot?
So they do operate with the before and after school program at this building. The shuttles and the buses that will use this parking lot are mostly for some of the off-site facilities. So there's a number of schools that don't have before and after, like elementary schools that don't have the before and after school program. So they're able to transport kids from different facilities to their schools. But like I said, this facility in the morning has very few kids that actually come there in the morning. The bulk of their shuttle buses and vans are going to other locations, other Boys and Girls Club facilities. Does that answer your question?
So there will be early morning idling of some of the vehicles?
Well, when parents do drop off and pick up, again, associated with Boys and Girls Club, that happens on the main campus site. The buses and the shuttles, they will leave the parking lot, go to the other facilities. If there's any drop off and pickup, it goes to the main campus, not associated with the parking lot.
I guess what I'm getting at is if, there's a vehicle on this parking lot that is picking up, off-site, so maybe the pickup's at 8 o'clock, they'd be idling at 7 a.m. to go to make their pickup.
Yep, so the only idling is really when the driver gets in the vehicle and leaves the site. They're not sitting there in the parking lot other than to get in the vehicle and leave the site to go to other facilities.
Yeah.
Just like when you get in your car and leave your driveway.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Any other question? Commissioner Fields?
Question for staff. Commissioner Fields, Jonathan, when you get a conditional use permit, it's currently zoned single-family residential, and we turn it into a parking lot, is there any economic downsides about not having the taxation for a single-family home and turn it into a parking lot?
To clarify, Jonathan Cummins, to clarify, the zoning is MUD, mixed residential, which allows a variety of uses. Essentially, the owner who is paying property taxes on a 0.24 acre site with a dwelling unit on the site would potentially be different going forward, being that it will just be a paved lot. So potentially the impact to the county on property taxes could be affected, sure.
Yeah.
But that's the only impact that I could think of along those lines, if that answers your question.
It does.
Okay.
Would you say that a parking lot typically has less revenue than a single family or mixed residential?
I would have to make assumptions at that point. I can't speak on
Thank you.
how assessment works on that kind of a.
Mr. Ornelas?
I would, Armando Ornelas, Assistant Community Services Director. I think the assumption would be that, in fact, a parcel with a structure on it would generate more property tax revenue. However, given the age of the structure, this is probably fully depreciated, and so it's probably relatively minimal.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
I have one question for the applicant, please.
Commissioner Blako?
Will you be allowing staff to park in this parking lot also?
This is pretty much a parking lot specific to the fleet because they have some odd-shaped vehicles. They're bigger than normal cars. It's going to be specific for those users. And like I said, we have 8 shuttle buses and vans, and those are larger than average vehicles. We have 2 trailers. So it's not your typical parking lot and that you're going to have striped parking for your average size car. It's specific for the Boys and Girls Club fleet vehicles.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Commissioner Reed?
I move to approve the conditional use permit CU 18-0017 associated with PCN 2022-0067, adopting findings C1 through C5 and the facts supporting these findings as set forth in the staff report, subject to the 8 conditions of approval as listed in the staff report.
I'll second this.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Next, we'll move along to general business, review and possible amendment of the Sparks Planning Commission rules and procedures.
Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission, Assistant City Attorney Allison McCormick for the record. This agenda item gives the Planning Commission the opportunity to discuss and decide whether to adopt various amendments to your rules of procedure as proposed by staff. You are required to review the rules of procedure annually, so this agenda item gives you the opportunity to comply with that requirement as well. Staff has proposed 2 versions of amendments, option A and option B. Both versions would clarify that action should not be taken at a study session except under particular circumstances. Both options would also explain that the process for appointing members of the Planning Commission to committees, subcommittees, or other bodies follows the same process as for a typical motion. Both options would also state that the Planning Commission's establishment of subcommittees follows that same process for a typical motion as well. Staff has also proposed grammatical and clerical changes to help clean up and clarify some of the rules also. The main difference between option A and option B is about the standing agenda item for announcements and committee reports. Option A would eliminate this item altogether from the Planning Commission's agenda. Option A would also allow Planning Commission members to report actions of various committees or other bodies during the comments from commissioners' agenda item, or if needed for a longer presentation, a special agenda item could be listed under general business. In contrast, option B would keep the standing agenda item for announcements and committee reports and would require members of the various committees to report on the actions of those committees during this agenda item at the first Planning Commission meeting of each month. The Planning Commission may choose to adopt either option A or option B, either of those options with additional changes, no amendments, or completely different amendments than those proposed by staff. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt option A, which allows more flexibility for reports on committee actions. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does the commissioners have any questions? Comments? Thank you. Okay. With that, I will take a motion.
Commissioner Funes will make a motion. I move to adopt the amendments to the Sparks Planning Commission rules of procedure set forth in option A as presented by staff.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Okay. Next, we move along to election of the Sparks Planning Commission Chairman for a term of 1 year from the following pool of candidates listed in alphabetical order: David Blako, Mary Brock, Scott Carey, James Fewens, Frank Peterson, Shelley Reed, and Diane Vanderwell. So at this point in time, I will take a motion. For a new chair.
Madam Chair, I
Commissioner
make a
Funes.
motion to elect Mr. Carey as our next chairman.
Okay. I have a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Commissioner Reed, I have a second, so I have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next. We have election of Sparks Planning Commission Vice Chairman for a term of 1 year from the following pool of candidates, listed in alphabetical order: David Blako, Mary Brock, James Fewens, Frank Peterson, Shelley Reed, and Diane Vanderwell.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Brock.
I move to nominate Shelley Reed as vice chair.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fulen, second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Next, move along to public comment. Do we have any requests to speak? Okay, with that, I will close the public comment. Next, move along to comments from the commissioners. Commissioner Carey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, thank you to my colleagues for electing me as chairman. That's a great honor. I really appreciate the nomination from Commissioner Fewens. I also wanted to publicly extend my appreciation to Mayor Smith and the Sparks City Council for reappointing me to this commission. I look forward to serving the city for the next 4 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Reed.
I'd like to also make a comment. I also would like to thank the city council for reappointing me as well. And thank you, Commissioner Brock, for the nomination for vice chair. I'd also like to say happy birthday. My daughter's birthday is today.
All right.
She's 14 years old, so.
Great. Thank you.
Sure she's at home watching, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. She's actually.
Next,
she's
I'll
in
take
dance.
all right, there you go. Next, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Can I have a second?
I'll second, Madam
I
Chair.
have a first and a second. We're adjourned. Thank you.